Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley. Welcome back to my channel. This is going to be my quarter one reading recap. I'm going to be recapping the books that I read from January through March. So we have 3 months worth of reading to get through in this video. I read 22 books, and honestly, my goal is to read 100 books this year, and I felt like 22 books was like not a lot. But then when I really thought about it, I was like, okay, I think that only puts me 2 books behind my goal, which isn't bad. And 22 books is still a lot. For 3 months worth of reading, that's still quite a bit. And so I'm, happy with that number. My average rating this month was 4 stars, which is pretty good. I will say I don't think or consider myself to be a very harsh rater, but it's still nice to reflect back on the books that I've read these past 3 months and know that I've enjoyed the majority of them. So that's my quick little intro. Let's get right into this video and start with January reads. The first book I read was Down the Drain by Julia Fox. This is her memoir. I guess for anyone who doesn't know who Julia Fox is, I don't really know how to describe her. I feel like she's just this like pop culture figure that's kind of emerged in the past 2 years. I was introduced through her like Uncut Gems meme that went viral on TikTok, and then her relationship with Kanye West. But I honestly, I wanted to pick up this book because I thought the cover was really cool, just being honest. And then I also thought that like I heard a lot of people saying a lot of good things about it, so I was like, okay, it probably wouldn't hurt to check it out. And I'm so glad I did. I honestly was pretty surprised at just how talented of a writer Julia Fox is. But I will say, I think the best way I can describe my thoughts about this book is like equal parts, like very entertaining and also horrifying. I think Julia Fox has a very naturally funny, like sarcastic voice, and I feel like that comes off very well in her book. But I don't want to downplay everything that's talked about in this book because she has been through so much. I mean, and that's where the horrifying part comes in. Trigger warning, like there's lots of talks about like physical abuse, child neglect, adult, essay, child essay, um very toxic, unstable, like romantic relationships, friendships, like, and just an overall like feeling of instability. And listening to her book and just hearing her talk about everything, I mean, it was really inspiring. I think it shows how resilient of a person she is. But I think the other thing that I really liked about this book is that I feel like with a lot of memoirs, like the it almost has this like conclusion of like, oh, I've been through so much and like I made it here. But I think with Julia Fox's book, the tone that I got was like, I've been through so much and I'm still figuring it out. Like I haven't necessarily reached like the finish line or the end point. Like I'm still trying to figure everything out, but that's okay and I'm going to get there. And I just felt like as a reader that was very inspiring. She's still very young, but yeah, she has a lot of life left to live. And so I think it was cool just like hearing her talk about how she's gotten to like where she is right now, but she also has a lot more growing to do. And so the second book that I read was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This is my second Kristen Hanna book, and honestly, I'm so happy that I have discovered her. I was like, Kristen Hanna is a historical fiction author, and I feel like I love history, and she has kind of reignited that love for history for me. And so I like just can't wait to read everything she's written. But The Great Alone specifically, it's about this girl Lenny, and then she's an only child and she has her two parents, and I think she's from like Seattle, Washington. But her dad is like used to be in the military and suffers from severe PTSD, and he just decides to just one day uproot the entire family and move them to Alaska or the Great Alone. And it kind of just shows, like, the entire book, it really just shows just how resilient and that Lenny and her mom have to be because her dad is very abusive, and they're in this very secluded place where there's not a large population, and the dad just kind of starts to go off the rails a little bit. And so this book really just like is honed in and focused on Lenny and her mother's strength. This book comes with a pretty like intense trigger warning. Not in the book, like this is me giving the trigger warning, because there is no warning in this book about just how graphic the details of like physical like abuse and assault are, and it's honestly quite horrifying and terrifying. And I think that's what made this book so emotional. Like, I know Kristen Hanna's books are supposed to be very like, you know, emotional, pull at your heartstrings, and this book definitely did that. But I do wish there just was a warning about just like how much physical abuse is shown on the page, to the point where it was so hard to read and I had to put the book down multiple times just to get through it. And so I gave the book 4.75 stars. The book was still amazing and incredible, but I think just because there was no trigger warning, like I just literally just like was not mentally prepared for just how intense this book got. And then I think the only thing that knocked my rating down a little bit as well was just the book is in like two parts, and the first half of the book is almost like a completely different book than the second half. And so the book kind of lags a little bit in the middle. And so I just wish, I think that that's just like the only thing that knocked it down a little bit, because in the middle it was like a little bit more of a slog, but then it picked back up towards the end. And of course, like I was bawling by the end of this book, crying in tears. It really is a beautiful story, but I just want to give that warning for anyone who's thinking of picking it up. Okay, I have to put my hair up. I feel like, I don't know if um girls who like wear braids can relate, but I feel like there's just there gets to a point when you have your braids where it's like I really don't know what to do with my hair, and I feel like that's where I'm at right now. And so I had to pull it up, but let's keep going. The next book that I read was Who's That Girl by Eve. This was Eve's memoir, and I honestly just picked it up because I saw it was like on sale on Audible for the longest, and I was like, okay, I just want something like quick to read after the heaviness like freaking brick that was The Great Alone. And so I just decided to read it. It's very, very short. I think the audio narrative is like less than 6 hours long, so it's very, very quick. But honestly, I am happy I picked it up. I didn't give it a rating. Same with Down the Drain. I didn't give it a rating, but um honestly, Eve, if you don't know who she is, I didn't know who she was when I read this book, but I found out that she is a rapper who was like very, very prominent, I guess, or her peak was in like the late 90s, early 2000s. And so she just had a very big influence on like hip hop, women in hip hop. And I think it was just really cool to hear her story. I really knew nothing about her, so I came into this book with no expectations, but I do think it was cool listening to this book, because there are a lot of songs that were by her that I've heard before, but that I didn't know were by her until I listened to the book. I didn't know that she was on Rich Girl by Gwen Stefani. She has the song Who's That Girl, you know, that the title of the book is named after. So I think it was really, really cool. I think if you just want like a quick like celebrity memoir to read, especially like after you read something like super like dense and heavy, I would definitely recommend this book. Then the next book that I read was Big Swiss by Jen Beagin. Big Swiss, it's like a lit fic book. I don't really know how to describe it. I guess it would fall under the category of like weird women's fiction. I really do love like literary and contemporary fiction, but I was kind of scared to read this book, to be honest, because I don't know, like I just hear a lot of people talk about like, oh, this book is very, very weird, and the cover of the book is very off-putting. And so I put it off for a while, but I don't know what changed, but I don't know. I guess I just had this like interest to read this book in the past couple months, so I finally decided to pick it up, and I'm so glad I did. I gave this book 4 stars. I honestly wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. The book is definitely very weird. It's about this woman who works as like a transcriber for a sex therapist. So her job is to like manually type out all of his sessions, because the therapist is trying to write a book about his sessions with his clients. But then she ends up falling in love with one of the therapist's like clients, and it's so bizarre and kooky and insane, and all the characters are ridiculous, but I genuinely found this book to be so funny, and like it was just very, very entertaining. I wasn't expecting it. I really thought, I was like, oh, this book might be interesting because the premise is interesting, but I was like, oh, if the characters are like super weird, I don't know if that'll be pretty off-putting, because I don't know how realistic like these characters would be in like real life. But I'm like, the characters in this book are actually insane, but it works. And so I feel like if you're just in the mood for like a very weird women's fiction book, I would definitely recommend Big Swiss. And then I read Caraval. This was my first big disappointment of the year, and I'm so bummed that it came so early because I was really, really excited to read this book. Caraval is the first book in the Caraval trilogy. I guess there's four books, but one of the books is a novella, and I think it's like a one-offish novella, so I don't even know if it counts. But Caraval is a trilogy, and it's like the precursor series to the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. And I wanted to read Caraval because I really wanted to read Once Upon a Broken Heart. So I my like thinking was like, okay, I'll get through the Caraval series and then I'll read Once Upon a Broken Heart. I know that they're like you don't necessarily need to read Caraval to read Once Upon a Broken Heart, but because it takes place in the same world, I obviously wanted to get any necessary context beforehand, but unfortunately, I will not be doing that. I read Carval. I gave it 2 stars. Let me see. Did I give it 2 stars? I did. And honestly, I feel like that might be kind of generous at this point. This book was so boring. Carval, it's basically about this like girl and her sister who like hear about this legendary carnival game. The carnival was called Carval, and they've been like wanting to go for their entire life, and so somehow they're able to sneak into the game. But then like the main character's sister goes missing, and it turns out like the point of the Carvel game is to find the sister, so she spends the whole game trying to find her. But there's just so much back and forth, and honestly, I kind of knew I didn't like this book because I spent the entire book almost feel like I was waiting for something to happen. And it's like the book is like not, it's not super long, but it's not like super short either. So I'm like, if I'm reading a book and I feel like the whole time I'm just sitting there waiting, like for something, I'm like, that's not really a good sign. It was just so dull and boring to me, to the point where I'm like, I don't have any interest to read the rest of the series. I still want to read Once Upon a Broken Heart, but I'm like, now I'll literally just, I like, my plan is to just look up the spoilers for the Carvel series to get any necessary context, because I'm not reading the rest of the books. It was too boring, so dull, massive disappointment, and a waste of my money, which I'm mad about. The next book, though, kind of redeemed itself. It's Between Us by Mari McFarlane. This is my second Mari McFarlane book, and I like this book a lot more than the first one that I read by her. I don't want to like say like a lot more. Maybe that was dramatic. The first book I read by Mari McFarlane was Just Last Night, and that book was good. But I think her books, I feel like the way they're described are described very rom-commy, and to me her books are not rom-coms at all. I feel like it's more literary fiction with a romance subplot. And so because like I didn't know that going into the first book, I feel like it knocked my rating down a little bit, but I knew it going into the second one, and so I feel like I was able to enjoy Between Us a lot more. Between Us is basically about this group of friends, and in the book focuses mainly on one character, Roisin. She's been with her boyfriend for like 10 years, I think, and they're all in the same friend group, and her boyfriend is like became this big screenwriter, and they're all gathered in this cabin to watch the premiere of like the boyfriend's new show. But then as they're watching, Roisin realizes that like her boyfriend put in like personal information that she's told him in the show without like her consent and without asking her. And so it kind of like creates this big fracture in the group, and then Roshin's trying to like find herself after being in this relationship with this man who really is kind of crap, and then maybe there's new romance, and maybe there is a way to rebuild the friendship. And so I thought the book was really, really sweet. I really loved it. I thought it was super just nice and interesting, and I don't really know what else to say about it. Like, am I going to say it's the best book I've ever read? No, but I think I gave it like 4.25 stars. It was really, really good. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I read it. And then the last book that I read in January, it was Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. This is the third book in the When in Rome series. And this book, the When in Rome series tracks four siblings, and this one is about the sister Emily. And she's a teacher, and she has this nemesis teacher, and he moves next door to her in the summer. I wonder what happens next. Like, of course, they bicker and they banter and they fall in love, and it was really, really cute and sweet. This was my favorite book in the When in Rome series. I think I gave this one 4.25 as stars as well. Um, I loved it the most, and I wasn't really sure how I was gonna feel because I gave When in Rome, I think 3.5 stars. I gave Practice Makes Perfect, the second book, barely 3 stars, and so I was on the fence about this one, but this one was by far my favorite. um I think I was a little bit worried because I'm like, Emily and the her love interest Jack are like in their 30s, and I was like, okay, I really don't want to see or read about 30-year-olds like bickering and acting super immature. But it worked. They weren't super immature. I feel like they got over the conflict, became friends quickly, and I feel like it was a true enemies to friends to lovers. And I love that. Very natural progression. Super cute book. Everyone should read it. That is all the 7 books I read in January. Let's get right into February. I'm excited to talk about my February books because historically February is a very good reading month for me. For the past 2 years, my favorite book of the year were both read in February. So I had high hopes for this month. I will say, now that we're in April and I'm recapping January, February, and March in this video, my favorite book of the year was not found in February this year, so I did break that streak, but I think it was found in March, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later. But let's talk about February. The first book that I finished in February was The Master of Me by Kiki Palmer. I was so excited to read this book because I love Kiki Palmer. I'm obsessed with her. I think as let me rephrase that. I don't want to say obsessed because I don't like to have parasocial relationships with celebrities. And I feel like even if there's a celebrity or an actor or singer that I like and admire, I try to put that boundary there. So I will say that I think I just admire Kiki Palmer as a person. I think out of all the celebrities that I've seen, obviously I don't know her, but she seems to just be very humble and well rounded and grounded. And that made me want to read her book even more. Um, I wasn't sure what to expect going into this because I heard a lot of people like say that they thought it was a memoir, but it was more like self-help. And I'm not the biggest self-help person, but I still wanted to read her book and support her and see what she had to say. So I listened to this and I'm so glad I did. Kiki Palmer is so funny. What did I give this book actually? I gave it 4.5 stars. So I thought it was really, really good. And I think with a lot of books and most things, your rating like depends on your expectation going into a book. And so I think if you have the wrong expectation, even if the book isn't bad, because it's different than what you thought, you may not rate it as high. So I'm kind of glad I read and kind of took the time to see what other people were saying before I read the book, because I think it helped me manage my expectations a lot more. And then I ended up giving the book 4.5 stars. This book is not a memoir. It is definitely self-help, but she does like sprinkle a lot of anecdotes to back up like the advice that she's giving. So I would say maybe like half memoir, half self-help. Like, you're still getting a lot of stories about her life, but it really is more about like the book is really divided into like different lessons that she's like learned and different types of wisdom that she has to share. But I thought this book was really insightful. I think Kiki Palmer is very wise. She said a couple of things in this book that I wanted to share because I still like I wrote them down or I typed them in like my iPad, and I still like think about them and go back to them to this day. But one of the things that she was talking about was this idea of like being paid what you're worth. And she kind of talks about like how, like, of course, like everyone, especially like with like life and how expensive everything is and how it feels like prices are going up but our wages aren't and no one's really getting paid what they're worth. It's like, of course, like everyone should push for higher pay if that's what they deserve. But she was kind of talking about like, especially in like entertainment, she was like, you're never really going to get paid what you're worth, or with any job in life you're never really going to get paid what you're worth because you can't put like a price value or like a price tag on your value. Like they're like, what's the saying, like invaluable, or I don't know if I'm saying that right, but like there is no number to perfectly encapsulate your value because like you are worth so much that like let's say someone like pays you $10 million for this movie and you're like, oh, I'm getting paid $10 million. Like it's like, girl, you're worth more than that, you know? Or if you're getting paid only $1 million for a movie, it's like, oh, I know my worth, I should be getting paid more. But it's like, what is your worth? 10 million? Because you're worth more than 10 million, you know? So I don't know if I'm describing it well, but it's basically like, yes, like obviously if you think you're getting paid dust and pennies, like advocate for yourself, but just like also advocate with the recognition that like there can never be a price tag on your value. So no matter what, you're never gonna get paid as much as you're worth. And if there's an opportunity that you really want to do that you think will grow your career and grow as a person, take it. Because even though maybe monetarily it may not be what you want, there's still other ways to learn and grow from those experiences. And I thought that was really, really wise. Another thing that she said was like this idea of like a ceiling, like people putting ceilings on other people and limits. Like she kind of talked about or used the example of how a lot of people think Beyonce's in the Illuminati, which is kind of silly, but it's like she was like, people think Beyonce is in the Illuminati because of how successful she is. Like people think that there's only a certain amount of success that you can achieve before like that success starts being suspicious, or it's like, oh, you must be doing dirty things to gain the success. Don't get me wrong, I think a lot of celebrities are doing shady stuff, but like Kiki is basically trying to explain that like there is no limit as to how successful you can be, and just because you're super successful that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing shady things to be successful. That just means you're super talented, and it's like, why are we putting a limit on like I can only go this far before it starts to get shady or weird? That's like, it's like you're placing limits on yourself even by thinking this way, by thinking there's only so far you can go, when it's like the sky's the limit. Literally, there is no ceiling, there is no limit. Like there, you can do anything. And so stop putting limits on people, because that's a reflection of the limits that you place on yourself. And then last thing that I will share, because I've been rambling about this book for so long, but the last thing that I do want to say that she talked about that I thought was really, really cool was just this idea of like people feeling scared or nervous to be the first to do something, especially like as black people and as like black women. It's like we're still hearing like, oh, first black person to do this, first black woman to do this. And sometimes people can be like, well, why is it the first time this is happening, or why do I have to be the first to do something? And it's like, girl, be the first. Like, yes, sometimes it's frustrating that we're still hearing first black anything, but at the end of the day, it's like you can either sit and complain that you're going to be the first person to do something, or you can actually just go out and do it and show other black women, show other black people that yes, you can do it too. Like, don't let the frustration of like having to be the first to do something stop you from doing it, because if you do, then we're never going to get to see those black people be in those spaces, you know, because you spent so much time complaining about it that you didn't even do anything about it. And so those are just some gems I feel like that her book that were in her book that I really, really loved. And so because of that, I definitely would recommend it. I think it's worth reading. Unfortunately, I wish I felt the same way about the second book that I did about The Master of Me, but I don't. The second book that I finished in February was Real by Kennedy Ryan. This book was a bummer. I'm going to say it from now. I did give it 3 stars, so I don't think the book was bad. I just think maybe it's my fault. I hyped it up so much in my head that it really just fell so flat for me. This book is basically a romance. It's between this woman Neva, and she's like a 30-year-old like actress, but she's been doing her gigs, but she hasn't really had her big break until she gets cast in this movie, and the director of the movie, his name is Cannon, and it's this like biopic of like this singer that was active and like popular in the Harlem Renaissance, and they're really passionate about telling the story. But of course, like Neva and Cannon end up in a romance. But for me, I just couldn't give it higher than 3 stars because I just wasn't rooting for the romance at all. Maybe it's me personally. Maybe I'm too much of like a stickler, but for me, I just don't like when there's an imbalance of power dynamics like in relationships, whether real or fictional. Like I understand this book is fictional, but for me it's like there's a 7 year age gap between Neva and Cannon. That's not like, obviously people in real life have those age gaps, but it's not an insignificant gap. And on top of that, he is her boss. Like he is the director of the movie. And there are discussions in this book about like how Neva dating Cannon can impact the like her career, because people would wrongly assume that like she only got the role because Canton was attracted to her, which isn't true. And so of course it's like you can't control other people's perceptions, but it's also like if this is her first big break, it's like why even risk it? And they do try to date in secret, but then they start being kind of reckless. And I also feel like their relationship was very, very physical. And I just didn't like it because she's 30, he's 37. And there's so many parts in this book where he's like, I can't resist her. Like, oh, I need her right now. And to me, I'm like, that's so cringy. I'm like, you're 37 years old, you're almost 40, and you don't have any self control. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, not having self control to me is very unattractive. Like this idea of like, oh, I need her right now. She's so sexy. She's so beautiful. I'm so attracted to her. I need her. I'm like, that is not attractive to me. Have some self control. Pull yourself together. Like you guys are working together. Um, where is the emotional connection? Like I couldn't really see it. And so reading this book was just very frustrating. I think it wasn't lower than a 3 stars because I found the backdrop of the book interesting. Like, oh, I love books that take place in like the entertainment industry, whether fictional or nonfiction. So I thought the fact that the backdrop was like them filming a movie, them being in Hollywood, it was very, very interesting to me. But because there's such this like power imbalance, it just didn't work. And of course there's like conflict and tension about that while they're filming too, because obviously Neva, she is going through a lot of like health complications as well, but like she doesn't necessarily, like she reports late. I don't know if this is a spoiler, but like maybe it is, but I also feel like I'm talking very generally. But they're like, she does some things that maybe she's not supposed to do, that Cannon, who's notorious for being a tough director, would be very hard on someone else for. But obviously, it creates tension when it's like, oh, well, are you going to be softer on Neva because you're dating her? But then it's like, if you're hard on Eva, she's going to get mad at you for like treating your girlfriend this way. So it just never works. It just never works. And because of that, unfortunately, Real got 3 stars. I still love Kennedy Ryan. I'm so excited to read her other books, but this one just wasn't really clicking for me, unfortunately. But y'all, fortunately, we found some redemption after Real, because the next book that I read was The Love Lyric by Christina Forrest. This was the third book in the Green Sisters trilogy. They're interconnected standalones, but I do think you should read them in order. The order is The Neighbor Favor, which follows the sister Lily, The Partner Plot, which follows the sister Violet, and then now The Love Lyric, the last book, which follows the oldest sister Iris. I loved this book. I love like the whole series as a whole. I read The Neighbor Favor last year, and I thought that book was literally exceptional. It was my first Christina Forrest book, and I was like, I literally have to read all her books now. And I literally was like so excited that The Love Lyric came out this year, and I was so excited to read it. This book follows Iris. She's a single mom, and she works for this like beauty company, and they sign their first brand ambassador, Angel, which is actually like a client of her sister Violet, who's a stylist. But Angel basically has to go on this like tour promoting the products, and Iris goes with him. And he's this like famous R&B singer, and of course, like they fall in love, and you get to see their entire love story and journey play out. Like all Christina Forrest books, this book was so fast paced, but it's also so well paced as well. I think she does pacing very well in her books, and this book was just sweet and tender. I was a little like skeptical as to how I would feel because I don't usually love like the single parent trope, but I feel like it wasn't like played out or played up too much. Iris is also widow, so we get little glimpses into like the grief that she's still going through with losing her husband. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I will say, I think I liked it the least out of all the books, which means that this book was incredible because I loved all of them. But I think this one is my least favorite, only because I think this book, I know it's a rom com and I appreciate its lightness, but I think this book, like, is very surface level, I guess, on some of the issues that it touches on. Like, I wish we delved a little bit more into what Iris is feeling about, like, dating after her husband. I wish we got more about, like, I feel like this book was very Iris and Angel, but I almost kind of wish we saw Iris, Angel, and Iris's daughter, and to see kind of how the three of them, how their lives would integrate together. And then Angel is also grappling with a lot of like family issues because his family is very religious, so he's trying to um like focus or like trying to find like the line between of like my faith and doing what I want and my family. And I kind of just wish we delved a little bit deeper into that. But other than that, those are just like personal things. Other than that, this book was amazing. Super fun, super fast paced, super interesting. And I love Christina Forrest, and I wish we got more. I wish she just gave us like three more books of just like epilogues as like extended epilogues of like all the other three books, because I could read about these sisters forever. But then the next book that I read in February was Finding Me, right? Yes, it was Finding Me by Viola Davis. And I wanted to read this memoir because so many people have raved about it. I know who Viola Davis is. I don't really know or think I've really watched anything that she's been in. Gasp. I know, how dare I? But I will say this book was incredible. I will say, like, I feel like the longer I let this book marinate, the more it really hits me because Viola Davis has been through so much. And I feel like I loved reading her book because I'm a social worker, and I just feel like her book and her story is like the epitome of like empowerment and finding that like self-empowerment to literally rise out of the toughest and darkest situation. She grew up in horrible, horrific poverty, um experienced sexual abuse, like disgusting racism, and it's like to it's like you would look at a child like that. So many people would look at a child like that and think that they will never make it out of that situation that they're in. But to see her resilience and her determination and her belief in herself that she could do it, that like she could create the life that she wants for herself, is so inspiring, because I'm like, that is like the reason why I feel like I even chose the career path that I did, because I'm like, I want to, like, I just want everyone to feel that empowered, to realize that like where you are is not where you have to be. Like, you can do anything you want as long as you like believe in yourself. And then even like she talks about her struggles with mental health, and she said something so powerful that like the cure for depression is courage. It's like courage to believe that like you can get out of this situation, that things will get better, and the courage to like go after what you really want and to create the life that you want for yourself. And I feel like that is the epitome of her story. The life that she has is the life that she created. It wasn't handed to her, it wasn't given to her. She built her life brick by brick. That's how determined she was. And I feel like every single person can get something so incredible out of her story. The next book that I read, because this book, what the Finding Me was pretty heavy. I was like, obviously, I feel like everything I just talked about, it's like, of course, like again, like just be mindful when you read that book. So I wanted something fun to read after. So I read X's and O's by Amy Leah. This is the second book in the Influencer series. This follows Tara. She's the sister of Crystal, and the first book in the Influencer series focuses on Crystal, but Tara is a nurse and she is like a romance book Instagrammer, book influencer, and she ends up like breaking up from her fiance, and she has to move in with this guy, and they're roommates, and then you can just really see the natural progression of Friends to Lovers. I love Friends to Lovers. It feels so organic and natural, and I loved this book because I genuinely like I'm being so genuine when I say this. This book was freaking hilarious. Like this book had me literally laughing out loud, dying laughing. This book was so funny and it was just what I needed. It was such a pick me up for me, and I loved this book. I think everyone should read it. Truly a rom com in the truest sense of the word, and I loved it. What did I give it? I gave it 4.5 stars. This book was incredible. It was amazing. Everyone read that book. You don't even need to read like the first book, just read this one. This book is amazing. But then the next book that I read was Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. I had wanted to read this book for a really, really long time, so I'm glad that I did. But this book, it's nonfiction. It's literally just like two essays that James Baldwin wrote on the like 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, and they're basically just reflections on race and religion and life in America. I eat all of that up. I Those are like my favorite things to talk about. I love just any book that like would I just love to learn, and um I think most people do. And I feel like with the times that we're in right now, I really feel like learning for yourself, learning history for yourself, and thinking critically and not being afraid to have deeper conversations about life and history and how we've gotten to where we are right now and how much further we have to go is so important. And I'm so happy I read this book. I feel like the biggest takeaway that I got is something that James Baldwin said of like, people always want to say America is the best country in the entire world. And people a lot of the time say that because of like the economic opportunity that they think this country can afford them. But it's like there has to be more to life or more to what makes something great than just the money. And I think it really just shows that like the root of all the evil in this country and in the world is greed, because it's like, how can we say America is the best country in the world when it's so morally bankrupt, when like America justified the buying and selling of human beings, of treating black people like property, like not even real people, and then after slavery still going through Jim Crow, and then the war on drugs and police brutality, and now this war on DEI and trying to erase diversity. It's like, how can we say America is the best country when it's still treating members of God's creation like second class citizens? And I feel like that was just so powerful to me, because I'm like, you can't be ignorant to everything that is going on. You have to know like that there is more to what makes a place great. And it's like redefining greatness. Like, what does that mean for you? And what does that mean for everybody? And then fighting towards something better. So I'm really happy I read this book. It was on my TBR for the longest time. And I think the lessons and just the introspection and the thoughts that he shared in this book, I think, is something that will always stick with me as I continue to shape and question and think about my beliefs and the actions that I want to take moving forward. I think this is a book that everyone should read, and it's really short. I think it's literally like 100 pages. So, not hard to read at all. Everyone should read this book. And then the next book that I read was Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi. I wanted to read this book because the premise sounds super interesting. It's about this woman. Her name is Gifty. She is like a neuroscience student, like PhD student, I believe. And her whole like study and the reason why she's like studying and in this field is to kind of understand addiction and to like what makes a person become addicted to something that they know is bad for them, and if there's a way to pinpoint it, like is there a way to make someone stop. Like if you can figure out what part of the brain like makes someone addicted, is there a way to alter that part of the brain so they stop? And the reason why she's doing this is because her brother died of like opioid overdose, and then her mother has been in like very very severe depression, and she grew up very very religious. So the whole book is about grappling with like what, like, why is this happening to my family? How do I reconcile my faith? Because it's like I have this strong, like I had this strong faith in God. My mother still has a strong faith in God, but then it's like, look at all these horrific things that have happened. Like, where is God in the midst of all of this? And how do I just make sense of like all the suffering that's around me? And I really loved this book. I love anything that questions like faith, religion, why we're here, why do bad things happen. As a Christian, like I just love when people just try to dive deeper and question and challenge things, especially as someone who's gone through my own journey of like questioning my faith and looking at, you know, the Bible and Christianity and suffering like just from a more critical lens, and just trying to understand and just almost just like reform and reshape the way that I view my faith and the way that I interact with my faith and the way I let it like shape my beliefs about other aspects of life. I love any book that offers those kind of introspection. So this book was amazing. I gave it 5 stars. It was incredible. It was so emotional. I was crying. And again, I think the social work side of me, especially all the reflections on like addiction and mental health, I think it was something that I really appreciated, and it's something that I find interesting, and that's what I want to do, you know, and that's the reason why I even got into the field. And so I just think this book, everything that I find interesting and everything that I love was wrapped up in this book, and it was amazing. And then the last book that I read was The Crash by Frida McFadden. I read this book literally like there are only a couple days left in the month. I was like, I just need something quick. The last couple books that I read were pretty heavy. I'm like, I know Frida is old Miss Old Reliable. Like I know that any book by her, I will be able to just breeze through, read super super quickly, and that's exactly what The Crash was. I gave it 3 stars. It's not my favorite Frida McFadden book, but I still really liked it. I just think the only, or should I say, I still really liked it in the sense that I think the premise was interesting. It's basically about this woman who's pregnant. She's like around my age, like 21, 22. Um, but yeah, she's pregnant, but she's a single mom, and she's like driving to live with her brother, but she gets caught in a snowstorm in the middle of nowhere, and this husband and wife like rescue her and try to nurse her back to health, and gets like a broken ankle as a result of this accident. But little does she know that the wife is like actually insane, and the wife's name is Polly, and I think the husband's name is Hank. And the thing is, it's like I don't want to spoil the book, but like something happens to her that like makes her not trust men, which I completely understand. Like if I went through what she went through, I would probably never trust any man ever in my life. So it's like her being skeptical of Hank makes sense, but I just think for me, this book was 3 stars because I did find it interesting, but I couldn't read it any higher because it physically pained me to see the main character be so dumb. Like she is so stupid. And I just feel like, yes, you're allowed to be um skeptical of Hank. And of course, we as the reader, we know that Hank is like relatively harmless. So but she doesn't know that. So it's like fine, whatever. That's fair, but like the fact that like she doesn't question Polly's actions in this book is truly baffling to me. And the way that she tries to keep making excuses for her, I'm like, no, girl, this woman is insane. Find a way to get out and get out. Like, I just couldn't. And so that's why this book was 3 stars. But like with most Frida McFadden books, I don't have like extremely high expectations, but I do know no matter what, they're going to be entertaining and they're going to be something quick and fun for me to read. And that's exactly what this was. So that was The Crash by Frida McFadden. Those are the 8 books that I read in February. Let's get into the home stretch of this quarter 1 recap, and let's talk about the books that I read in March. Okay, so the first book that I read in March was The Favorites by Lane Fargo. I am calling it now. I honestly think that this will be like my book of the year. This book was incredible. I haven't given a book 6 stars. I don't know, like if not ever, then in a long time. But this book was freaking amazing. This book is about this ice skating duo, Heath and Katarina, and they're these super, super famous, like Olympic level ice dancers, but they're in a lot of drama. And then it's like on the 10-year anniversary of their final skate, there's this like documentary that happens that recaps their entire life. And so we're literally, it's almost like if you like Daisy Jones and the Six, of how it's very interview style. This book has, it's not purely interview style, but it has a lot of like interview elements in it, as well as just like a general narrative. But this book was incredible. um I can understand how this book may not be for everybody, in the sense that not everyone likes drama, because this book was very dramatic, and a lot of the things that happen in this book could be categorized as like drama just for drama's sake, but I loved it. I ate it up. I love reading about drama, and I love watching drama. I mean, that's why I watch shows like The Bachelor and like a lot of reality TV, because I just love seeing the drama. And this book was pure drama, pure angst, pure toxic relationship, and it was freaking amazing. I loved it. This book, 6 stars. I think about this book all the time. It was one of the best books I've read in a long time, that genuinely just like lit a fire. Like I've loved reading, and I always have, but this book, it was like if my spark was dulling a little bit, this freaking roared it right back up. This book was amazing. But I will say, I think because it was so good, I think I did enter a little bit of a slump after. I still kept reading, but when I look back actually at the books that I read in March, I'm like, all the books kind of make sense, because I feel like I was kind of all over the place with my reads, because I just didn't know like what to read after, because I'm like, nothing is going to be as good as the favorites, but it's so good. Everyone should read this book. So dramatic. I love ice dancing. My hyperfixation fantasy, even before reading the book, was um like ice dance. And so reading this book, I'm like, this is literally like my maladaptive daydream is ice dance, and this is feeding right into it, and I freaking love it. This book was amazing. Everyone should read this book. But then the next book that I finished in March was The Many Lives of Mama Love. This book I heard about from another booktuber. I think it was Lexi. But she kind of talked about this book, and she had mixed like reactions about it. So I was curious to read it. But this book is basically about this like woman, Laura Love. She is this white woman who grew up in a relatively like affluent area, but she has a big like heroin addiction, and she has children, and she ends up going to jail because of like not just like her usage of drugs, but like she steals and she cheats at a lot of people in order to feed her addiction. But she ends up going to jail, but only for like a year. But even that year has completely changed her entire life. And this book really, it's a memoir, but it's also like a deep dive into the criminal justice system. And like again, like as a social worker, like I just find all of that, it's some, as a social worker, it is something I'm very passionate about, like criminal justice, and just how disastrous like the system is, and how much it does not like, it's not like designed to help people rehabilitate and enter society. If anything, it's like if you go to jail, they want you to go back to jail. They want you to go back because they benefit off of your free or barely paid labor. And a lot of prisons are privately owned, so it's like the more people that are in prison, it's like it's like a profit. It's literally like prison and jail, it's its own business, which is disgusting. But essentially, this book is kind of just like a look into that, and I feel like this book was, I think I struggled with this book a little bit, because Laura, she mentions it like once in the book, but I wish we almost got a little more of a deep dive into like, even though her life is extremely hard after she gets out of prison, her finding a job and trying to take care of her family and regain her like parental rights after is a super like intense struggle, that like no matter what race you are, if you are in the system, you are going to have to deal with it, and that's a problem. She does mention once in this book about how like she recognizes she's a white woman, and how like even the other women that she was in jail with who were black or Latina, how they probably are going to get way worse sentences and just like way worse like outcome than she would. And I kind of just wish she delved more deep into it, because even though her book was so inspiring, um and heartbreaking, because it really was so hard to like hear the struggle that she had to go through, and just like the way so many people like cast her out and like place so much judgment on her when she's just trying to do better, and she really was just genuinely a woman struggling. But I do wish she kind of just like touched on about how like even how there was still a lot of privilege that like benefited her, that allowed her to get to where she ended up. But again, almost like Viola Davis's memoir, I feel like her um story is a testament to resilience, but also just like a glaring reminder that we need more mental health like resources in, especially within the criminal justice system, because I feel like not a lot of people are gonna have that mentality of like, let me just keep going. It's so demoralizing and discouraging that it's like no wonder so many people end up going back to jail after they've gotten out, because you just don't think they can do it. And so I think this book, I it just caused me to reflect a lot, which I always appreciated. I do think this book was also important only because like, you know, it's not just her that was affected by her drug use and her prison time. Like she has kids and she had young children too. And you know, I'm someone who like I just take the like parenting. Like I don't have children, but I also don't have children because I know how big of a commitment that it is. That I'm like, I'm 22 years old. I don't want any kids till I'm 30 because I know that I don't feel ready for that right now. I don't want to take on the responsibility of having a child right now, because I know that like when I become a parent, like that child will literally be my everything. And so I think that was just like the only hard part about this book. It's like, yes, it was inspiring to see her finally like get to that point where she's like, okay, I'm never going to touch drugs again because I just want to be with my son. But at the same time, like sometimes I'm like, God, like there's always that like push and pull between of like addiction is a disease, but it's like sometimes I'm like, oh, did it take her too long to get it together, like for her child? But like, you know, she genuinely loves her child. And then, but it also is like a reminder that there are consequences for your actions. And it's like, of course, like I'm someone who's super passionate about like anyone can turn their life around and do better. And I hope that people are more understanding and give people more trust and grace. But at the same time, there are consequences for your actions. And sometimes you have to be okay and just make peace with the fact that like certain people in your life are never going to trust you again, because even though you're trying to do better, like you still like damage their sense of security, damage their trust. And sometimes it's not even about making those people like forgive you, which I feel like is something she was kind of focused on in the book, but just trying to chart a new way forward, but also just making peace that like sometimes you're going to make bad decisions in life and you're just going to have to live and just understand that there are consequences, and sometimes those consequences will follow you forever, whether you want it to or not. So that was The Many Lives of Mama Love. And then the next book that I read was My Body by Emily Ratajkowski. I don't know how to feel about this book. What did I give it? Did I even give it a rating? I gave it 4 stars. I feel like maybe now that I'm reflecting on it, it's 3 stars. But this book is like, Emily Ratajkowski is a model. She's a very famous model, and this book has been out for a while. And I've wanted to read it for a while, so I guess in a way I'm glad I did. But they're just like feminist essays about like women and women's bodies, and I thought a lot of her like it was well written. I thought a lot of her insights were um like very interesting. I think the only thing that I didn't really like about this book is that I almost feel like it came, I'm trying to be careful with how I say this, because Emily like talks about men in this book, but in a way that I feel like sometimes is unnecessary or came off a little bit hypocritical, in the sense that like she'll say like, oh, this like big fat greasy man was like looking at me, or like this guy like made a comment about me, but he's so fat and like ugly. But I feel like it, like what's the point in saying that? Like obviously if a woman even said that about another woman, we'd be like, why are you like calling someone fat and ugly as like an insult? She talks a lot about body positivity in this book, but it even feels kind of just like unproductive or just a little hypocritical, because she'll talk about how people wanted her to be skinnier even though she was already super skinny. And you know, obviously like she would be someone who would be like, yes, all bodies are beautiful, whether you're fat, thin, like curvier, like it doesn't matter. But it's like, so for me it's like, okay, so it's wrong to like insult a woman's body, but it's okay to call a man fat and ugly. Like, I think that man can still be a creep without you bringing his weight or his looks into it. And so I think because of that, I that was just like something that she did in this book that I just didn't really like, because I'm like, how I think the whole point is that fat and ugly should just never be used as an insult. Like, why are we calling people fat as an insult? Because you would be mad if like someone called a woman fat as an insult. So why do you think it's okay to do that to another man? You know, that man is still a creep, but you don't need to bring his weight and all of that, or his physical appearance into it. So I feel like that's just something that I didn't really like about this book. I kind of wish there was maybe a little more intersectionality talked about, because obviously she's a white woman and she's a very affluent white woman, and of course she's only speaking from her experience, but I guess maybe I felt like this book could have been better if like she sought out other perspectives that she could have also brought into this book to kind of create a more well-rounded um like picture, I guess, as to what women go through, um and just to, you know, the struggles that a lot of women face today. So that was My Body. Not bad, but it wasn't my favorite. And then I read Begin Again. This book was fine. It was like a young adult book. I got it in Barnes, and I mean, I never really heard about the book before I bought it. So I guess it was kind of a random buy for me, but it's basically about this girl. She's in college for the first time, and she like has a long distance relationship, but it's not really working out, and it kind of just follows, and she's also dealing with like grief from like the death of her mom. So the book was cute. It was fun. It was just like almost like a coming of age tale of just a girl like finding herself in college, making new friends, and it was very nostalgic for me, especially as someone who I feel like I didn't have a very traditional college experience. It was cool to read this book and live vicariously through someone else, even if it was a fictional character, and to see like, oh, doing all these clubs and working all these jobs and doing these dorm things, like maybe that's cool. Like that wasn't really my experience in college, and so it was kind of cool to see, I guess, how a more traditional or stereotypical college experience played out, but it was very, very sweet. I don't really have much else to say. I gave it 3.5 stars, so not bad, but I probably won't really think about this book ever again. And then I read The Catch by Amy Leah. This is the third and final book in the Influencer series. This book follows, I think her name is Melanie. She's the best friend of the sisters Tara and Crystal. Um, but she's a fashion influencer, but she's gone through a lot in life. She doesn't really have a very strong family system. She only really has her brother and her two best friends. But she is like struggling financially, and she kind of gets this opportunity to do this like promotion for this hotel, but the trip ends up going haywire, and she ends up in this like Airbnb in this like remote part of Canada, and she ends up like getting close to like, or not getting close, because this book is kind of like enemies to lovers with fake dating, but like basically like stuff happens. The Airbnb host doesn't really like her, but like something happens and they have to pretend they're engaged, and of course, you know, they end up falling in love. I don't know, I gave this book 3 stars. It wasn't bad, it just didn't really click for me like the other books did. This book, it just didn't really hit me the same. It was like mildly entertaining, and it wasn't bad, but I guess I felt like because like the two, Melanie and then her love interest, only really get to know each other for like a week, and then half the week they spent hating each other. Again, like it just didn't feel extremely realistic. Like I get that people move fast, but it's felt a little too fast, you know? So I wasn't that invested in it, but it wasn't bad. You know, there's no more books I don't think coming in the influencer series, so it's over. And so it was kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. It's fine. And then I read Hillbilly Elegy by JD Vance. To be honest, I had no desire to read this book. I was like, screw JD Vance. I don't like that guy. Well, actually, no. Don't like the man who he ran with, the president. But it was very interesting because in the like leading up to the election, I watched the vice presidential debate, and I was actually like pretty surprised, because I felt like seeing JD Vance and Tim Waltz like debate against each other, it was actually quite respectful. And I was like, oh, JD Vance is kind of smart. I don't know how his intelligence led him to the beliefs that he has today, but he actually didn't seem like super crazy or that arrogant in the debate. Like it was actually a pleasant surprise. And so I feel like I have always just been kind of confused about this guy because even though I don't believe with his political beliefs, I'm like, oh, I feel like objectively he's kind of smart, almost too smart to be running with Donald Trump. So he was just always confusing to me. But I never had any desire to read his book because I was like, what would I support? But then Kyra Stewart, she's another booktuber, and I'm in her book club. She talked about like the book in a YouTube video, and she said it was really, really good. And I was like, you know what? Let me just read the book, kind of just to get some backstory. I'm like, at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, he is the vice president, so I think it would be um productive to just learn more about him. And guys, like, I don't know if anyone's watching this, but I would have to say, I was so surprised by this memoir. I usually don't rate memoirs at all. I gave this one 5 stars, which is like mind blowing to me because I still am not like a supporter of his administration. But like looking at the book objectively, he has gone through so much in life that, again, almost like Finding Me by Viola Davis, it's like his story is very inspiring. Seeing that he came from poverty, came from a mom who dealt with a lot of substance misuse, dealt with so much instability in his childhood, and grew up around people who almost like the cycle, like everyone kind of were going through the same unstable family dynamic that he was going through, and that cycle just kept repeating. So even for him, not even seeing a lot of examples of people who broke out of that cycle and seeing how he was able to was so inspiring. And I found his story so interesting. And I think for me, I even though I grew up nothing like him, my boyfriend, I would say, grew up similarly to him, or not even similarly in terms of like, the constant, like, it's like family dynamic, men coming in and out of the house, like parents doing drugs, but almost in the same environment. Like my boyfriend's from Indiana, and then JD Vance grew up in like Ohio and Kentucky, and a bunch of white people, bunch of like blue collar workers. Like that's kind of the environment that like my boyfriend grew up around too. So I feel like just even I could relate to JD Vance's story by looking at it through like his lens. And so I found his story so inspiring, and I think everyone should read this book, especially Democrats actually, because I feel like it caused me to reflect a lot on like the last election, and I don't want to talk super long about like politics and stuff, but I always felt like I feel like the reason why Kamala Harris didn't win is because she could not relate to like that segment of like the population, like the white rural blue collar workers from like the Indianas, the Kentuckys, the West Virginias, the Ohio's. And I felt like reading his book was important because I feel like it was almost like a case study as to like how to relate to them. But this book was also so confusing because I thought it was so good, but I'm like, JD Vance, how did we end up from here to where you are now? Hearing him talk about how even his grandparents or Democrats, and like, of course, you don't have to believe the same things that your family believes, but it's like even hearing about the stuff that like he even talks about in this book of like how we can make our communities better, how we can help people get out of this cycle. It seems completely out of alignment to what his administration is doing now. I'm like, I don't know how someone like JD Vance can go through what he's gone through, talk about the reflections that he has in this book, yet align with himself with like such this far right extremism that we're seeing right now. So I think that's the only thing that was just like so confusing to me because the book was amazing. So I'm like, how did we end up here? I don't know, but I wanted to talk about it because I was honestly very, very pleasantly surprised by this book, but it was also confusing because I'm like, I feel like he lost the plot a little bit. I'm like, I don't know how you can go through what you go through, have an understanding of the people in your communities. He even talked about, even talked a little bit about how, like, the racism that's also like present there, but also how like poor black people and poor white people are actually more alike than you think. And I'm like, How did we end up here? I don't understand it, but it is what it is. But that was Hillbilly Elegy. And then the last book that I finished in March was The Assassin's Blade. Um, Kyra Stewart's book club that I'm a part of is doing like a Throne of Glass buddy read, and this is actually a reread for me. I read the Throne of Glass series a long time ago when I was in middle school and high school, and I honestly thought the series was fine. I loved the first few books, but by the end I was kind of over it. But I also read it over the course of a few years, and so I feel like because of that, by the time I got to the last book, I was kind of over it. So part of me was like, oh, I wonder if I'll feel differently about the series as a whole if I read them more like consecutively. And so I read The Assassin's Blade. It's the Throne of Glass novellas. And I thought it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I was like, I forgot how good the book is. And it kind of like got me to reflect on like the series when I read it the first time. And like I said, I really liked the first like four ish books in the series, and then 5 and 6 I was like, by the time we got to 7 or 8 I was kind of over it. But I was like, oh, this book like reminded me how good this series is. And I feel like I typically don't read a lot of fantasy, and fantasy is something that I've kind of been wanting to get back into this year. So it was cool for me to read because I was like, oh, like this is good fantasy. And it's like kind of getting me back into fantasy a little bit. Maybe I'm about to be in my fantasy era. But that was all the books that I read in um January, February, and March. I hope anyone who watched this enjoyed this video. It got some new recommendations of what to read. And then let me know what I should read next. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks to anyone who watched. Take care. Bye.